Today, we're going to do a fun, chatty Q&A, and I thought it would be, spicy to toss in having it as a conversation as opposed to me doing it by myself. So today, I've got Denise with me, one of my amazing students, which is really crazy. We've known each other for now going on a couple of years, but haven't met each other in person until now. So the beauty of the internet and just being able to connect with folks and be able to learn and grow together is really cool. And you are my most inquisitive, most chatty student, which is absolutely a win and something that I admire about you because you gonna ask your questions.
I'm gonna ask. The people want to know. People want to know, just it.
So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have Denise question me.
Yeah. We all have stories and we all are trying to get somewhere. And it's nice to see your story to me.
Okay.
So although I have heard it, but the people want to know, how did it start? Where did it start?
Okay.
We know you know how to save some money and get out of debt, but what got you there?
Yeah, it's interesting because math was something I avoided like the plague. I became a therapist because I wanted to avoid math. Which degree has the least amount of math? Let's go down that path, right? And now I talk about money and numbers all the time. I think that your path finds you a lot of the time, right? And so I think a lot of us are searching, which is cool, but it's going to find you whatever you're supposed to be doing in life, who you are supposed to be. And I think that it's birthed out of tragedy, honestly. And so I think a lot of times people look at other people's stories and they're like, oh my gosh, you love hearing my story. But it's tragic, y'all. I got divorced from my high school sweetheart and my dad died a few months after that. This was all in 2014. It was a really tough time. I was in my first year of grad school and I was broke. And I was, broke and bankrupt emotionally from everything that I was going through. And so it was a few years of just kind of going through the motions, which I feel like a lot of women have a tendency to do. We know how to be in survival mode. Exactly. You know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah.
So we know how to keep going when the chips are down. And so it was in that season where I was just walking through life kind of like a shell of myself. I probably looked cool on the outside. I probably looked like I was all right. But there was things that I wasn't addressing on the inside, and I wasn't living the life that I wanted or envisioned for myself. And so after a few years of kind of being in a fog, I came out of what I call that grief storm. My cousin had given me a book that was called The Smart Money Woman. And it was a book about an African girl and personal finance, essentially. In it said to calculate your net worth. This was about January 2016 January 2017, sorry. And I calculated my net worth and it was a negative.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
I was like, well, what are we going to do about that?
Right. 100%.
So it was a combination of those things that were okay, I was sobering up essentially.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I can keep going the way that I'm going. And I didn't like the way that looked.
Yeah. Or
I could try to go down a different path. And so the question here is what if. When you start to ask what if questions, and I saw this in a reel recently, then you open up your creative problem solving and give yourself pathways to a different version of your life.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when life happens, they put their head in the sand or they stop or they run in the other direction. And that keeps them from being able to figure out what options they have. So for me, the shift is where most people would be like, oh, I'm stuck. I was like, how are we gonna get out? Because you see yourself living borderline bougie. You see it.
Right.
So if you see it, you could probably do it.
Yeah. 100%.
That's how it started at a very basic
level. Yeah. So then around that time, what did your community look like? Was that just you persevering and when you figured out you were in the negatives, did you tell someone or was that all internal? Did you keep that inside? When did you start inviting others in to help?
Yeah. I think that's really good. Community-wise, for a lot of it, I think I was by myself in it. But then as I was starting to get really serious about the changes that I was going to make, I had no choice but to tell people because my life was going to look different,
Yeah.
right? So I could keep it to myself until I started selling stuff, and then my friends is coming over and they're like, stuff is missing at the house or whatever.
What's going on, girl?
Are you okay? Are things good?
Yeah.
And I ended up moving in with my best friend. She was gracious enough, so I had to have a conversation with her, like, hey, this is why I want to like move in with you and reduce my cost of living and da-da-da. So I think it was me in isolation until I realized in order to hit the goal, I was going to have to enroll other people in the vision. I had to let my family know, hey, I'm going to be working a lot, so there might be things that I might miss. And there was a lot of birthdays, and there was a lot of like anniversaries
Gatherings
or weddings or gatherings that I missed, or that it's like, oh, we're going to go out to eat. Like, cool. Like, I'm going to come and I'm going to eat before. Or I'm going to come and I'm going to eat whatever's free at the table. I literally have gone to restaurants with my own food. And sat there and ate whatever I brought with me. And I dared a waiter to tell me something.
But that's the important things. Those are the important things where it's like there's sacrifices that you're going to have to make, and they're going to seem quirky to other people when you talk about it or when you bring your own food. But you have to remember that, right? You have to remember why am I doing this? Because in the moment, like you might feel foolish, right? But it's remembering the why.
Yes.
Remembering that why. So with that and family is an interesting dynamic when it comes to money, especially depending on what your history looks like. My family's from Dominican Republic, so like it was a struggle. And it continues to be, but like how do you start making boundaries when it comes to your money and trying to save money while other people keep asking you for money? If that happened to you, I'm not sure, but how do we create boundaries around our money and how we can build or pay our bills and things like that?
Oh, this is such a good question.
Girl, I got you.
So boundaries, oh my gosh, are going to be your best friend as you are trying to build wealth without burning yourself out. Because the lack of boundaries on your wealth building journey is a one-way ticket to burnout land. Okay? To not having it.
Yeah.
So if you want to build boundaries, or if you want to create healthy boundaries that help you to build wealth, then what you're going to have to do is first revisit, what you learned growing up and how those turned into beliefs that inform the boundaries you do or don't have right now. Right? And so I say those 3 B's: background, beliefs, boundaries, because those are the manifestation of the other 2. Now, when it comes to family, your family's from the Dominican Republic. My family is from Uganda. I talk to women all over the world who have families from different places, right? Whether they're first gen and whatnot. And a lot of the time, at least I know, in African culture, is that like there's a culture or a tendency to send money home, to send money back, right?
Yes, the box of stuff.
So you're supposed to, right, send goods or send money or send, what you can to support other family members wherever they're at. And it's such a noble cause, and it's such a pleasure and something like a, what is it called? A gift. To be able to do that. However, in order to be able to do it sustainably for the long run, you might have to seasonally stop or reduce or be specific in what that looks like. And so it requires a conversation, because if you have been sending $100 every month to so-and-so, but you realize like, ooh, I'm going to have to send 50 instead of 100 because 50 needs to go to paying down debt or whatever the case is, that it's an opportunity to have a conversation. And the way that you frame that conversation is going to make a huge difference. So if I just don't tell someone that I've been sending $100, that I'm going to cut it in half, then that's going to turn out one way, right? If I'm like, hey, I can only send you $50, from here until here because of X, Y, and Z, that's going to look different. So I think having your own clarity and game plan on what shifts have to happen and what those boundaries look like before you communicate them is going to be the most helpful for you to communicate. But establishing a boundary isn't the hardest part. Maintaining it is. So I can tell you something. But because of our history, without it being malicious, you know what I mean, or conscious, you might push back on the boundary. Because you're used to what you're used to. So I can't be offended. I love the 4 agreements. I have my kid like repeat it regularly, right?
The 4
I
agreements.
actually haven't read the book, but I'm reading it.
Okay.
But I know what the 4 agreements are.
Yeah. Yes, that's the important. Yeah, that's the important part. Yeah.
So I asked my kid what the 4 agreements are. And, not taking things personally is one of them. Not, making assumptions is one of them. Not, what is it called? Doing your best is one of them. Being impeccable with your word. And so those are boundaries. That's what the 4 agreements are.
Right.
And you're going to have to maintain them by recommunicating. You know what I mean? So next month when they're like, oh, wait, where's the rest of the da-da-da?
Yeah.
Or when they ask for whatever it is that they typically ask for, you just compassionately, from a place of love, get to remind them of that boundary and that you're doing this so that in the long run, you get to do so much more.
Right.
Imagine me sending 200. Imagine me sending 500.
Right.
Imagine me sending 1,000. As long as I do what I'm supposed to in my journey right now, I'm going to get to do so much more for our family later. And I think when we reframe that conversation to enroll them in the vision, then it's easier over time.
Yeah, exactly. And over time, they do understand, but you do have to get through that.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
They may not. If they don't, you still have to stand 10 toes down on what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's hard. That's hard. But we do it, right? Because again, remembering the why, remembering that North Star. So that's the family that you are brought up with. Now, when we talk about chosen family, right? Because in your journey, right now you're with your friend, you're living with a friend. I know boyfriend, husband starts to come into the picture. How do those conversations happen while you're trying to figure out your money status, but understanding that you have a future that you're going to share with someone? Like, how do you have those conversations?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, even though we probably shouldn't be skinning cats.
Mm-hmm.
So there's options and different ways of bringing it up. Some people might want to have that conversation depending on how serious they are at that time that they want to have a long-term relationship or get married, right? So I think to back up a little bit, we have to start with the end in mind. What is the purpose of this relationship, which a lot of people aren't maybe necessarily doing. If I meet somebody at the club and I'm hey, right? Like I may not be thinking about like, I want to get married, so I should talk to this person about money at the club. Like that may not be the case.
Right.
But
actually, please don't do that. Go scare them away.
But so it depends on the context of like how you meet this person, what's the intention for the interactions and relationship with this person.
Right.
And that's going to dictate to some extent how you have that conversation. Then you're able to take some time to look at your situation, if you haven't already, to figure out where you're at and what you're working on. I had time. It's been a couple years before I had met my now husband, that I was in my stuff deep. Okay. Yeah. I was drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right. Yeah.
My Kool-Aid. All right. So by the time I met him, it was just an integration. It was already what I was doing for him to see what I was doing, for him to know what I was up to. And so it wasn't like I'm interrogating him about what he's doing in his personal finances. Right. It's just like, this is what I'm doing and where I'm at and what I want and where I'm going. What you up to? Like, what do you want to create? What are you working on? What's your painting, look like? And so I think that being able to frame everything from, it's not about positivity. It's more so about prosperity, like having conversations in prosperity and abundance. What are you working on to create in this season or in your life? Like what would life look like in the best version of what you could do? Money not being an option, money not being something that holds you back, you know? And so I think that being able to have conversations in that way makes it easier to have hard conversations. Because I'm going to interview my husband and he'll talk about some of his money history. Right. Sometimes we have our stories that come with all kinds of different stuff in them. So we have to remember, like, we have our own money history, but another person has a completely sometimes opposite or different history than us. And how can we be compassionate in some things that might be touchy for them, but easy for me to talk about. So I think that has to be taken into consideration, and knowing that it's going to be over and over again. We have bite-sized conversations again and again over time, as opposed to like, we're going to talk about this once and never do it again. So I think that even with friendships or family, it's the same approach. Just swap out who it is that you're talking to. So if it's a romantic partner, then it's the integration of like, are we going to do our finances together? Are we not? If it's a friend, I was living with my best friend. It's making sure like, how can I be a great roommate and friend? And am I taking care of my responsibilities as a person in this household, right? Sharing space. But then also with friends that I didn't live with, talking about money and different things like that,
Yeah.
I didn't want to like beat anybody over the head. Me and my journey was not about telling people what to do in theirs.
Yeah.
But I noticed that sometimes like being on my journey might trigger other people
Yes.
in their journey. Like I'm not judging anybody that's doing whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. It's you do you. I want the best for you, but like do you. But sometimes people feel interesting because you're essentially shedding light on something that they might be insecure about, or they might have
100%.
trauma around, or whatever the case is. And just compassion is huge. Being able to know that it might be uncomfortable, and then being able to be uncomfortable in whatever that is.
Right. Being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think we talk about that a lot, where it's like, that's where it's at, right? Being uncomfortable. Because I think that one of the conversations we first had was like, I have to talk to my husband about money.
Yes. I loved that. And I was like, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Because when and really it was born out of like, I was doing research at the time for the book and different things like that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm getting ready to, open a program for women who want to. Yeah. And so when we were having the conversation, did it feel like I was trying to convince you of doing something?
No, we were like legitimately having a conversation. Like, I need to have this conversation. Like I'm still nervous. It's still a thing because of my history, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still a thing. So I think that, having these conversations really does help. So that's why I like the community aspect of when we're going through something, talk to someone, especially about money, because it could be so finicky. It's one of those conversations.
It's a sticky topic.
Yeah.
And you said I have to talk to my husband, but it's nice because if you have support wherever, right, for anyone who's watching, if you have a community or you have support or you have people on your money team that you can talk to about things, it's easier for you to then be prepared when you do go talk to your husband.
Yes.
To be able to have a more cohesive, clear message that you bring to him. And then for you to be able to discuss and figure out what makes the most sense in your relationship, in your lives at that time, so on and so forth. And so I love that sparked a conversation.
I think we role played even. I think we might have. Yeah, like, okay, so what do you think he might say?
Yes, role play. Come on. I love it. But hopefully that helps
It did.
And whether you didn't enroll, right? Like whether you enrolled or not, hopefully that opened the door.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like you just need, nothing has to go from 0 to 100. And that's the thing. Like time is going to move, things are going to happen. And each little nugget turns into a bigger thing. And so now it's like 2 years later and I'm still having those conversations, but not with the fear. I have it with more confidence than fear. Right. So that's, we learn a little bit. So with that, in any journey, you're going to have these roadblocks and they're going to keep happening. Right. So how do you go through some setbacks where you're like, oh man, or even I think we had a conversation one time where in our group, we had a conversation of someone needing to dip into their emergency fund. Right. And how like they were pretty bummed about that and like how much it was setting them back. And you had said something like, well, what is it there for? Right. Yeah. And I think that people need to be reminded of like these setbacks, like if you're ready for them, you're ready. This is what you have it for, right?
It's game day, you know? Yeah. It's game time, So I love that you bring it up because that's one of the biggest things that I get asked is, oh, I'm so discouraged because I saved some money and then I had to use it and now I have to build it back up and you feel like you're starting from zero, but you're not because you had the cushion, right? And so I think that being able to, like you said, be reminded by your community about why you created the fund in the first place. This thing qualifies, right? Like, this is it.
This is it, right?
This is it. And be grateful to yourself and I'm glad that you can allow the money to come and to flow because if we talk about a relationship with money, I don't know who's ever been in a controlling relationship. I know I have. It wasn't fun.
Right.
I didn't ultimately want to be with that person. I would never go into another controlling relationship. So we want money to be in a relationship with us that it wants to be in.
Right.
And for that to be the case, we have to let it flow.
Right.
And we have to let it come back to us instead of being like, you can't lead a house.
Right.
So you put it in the savings and you're not allowed to go anywhere. You know what I mean? So I think that little mindset shift can be helpful. And then knowing like you get to now exercise your money muscle to build your emergency fund back up.
Right.
it's easier said than done. We all get discouraged in our journeys. Half the time I'm really encouraged by our community because I get to share and encourage y'all, but y'all keep me motivated and inspired to move forward because we're all running together and we're all at different places and we're all experiencing all
the things.
Yes. It's not all sunshine and rainbows when we chat, and it's not like supposed to just be rah rah shishkumba. It's like, let's talk about the real. Like, or if you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk. You can come and listen. You can just come and soak it up. You can disappear for a few months. You can come back. Like, I think that's what women need, is to not have to feel like they have to do it all alone, but also that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all together.
Yeah.
Come as you are. Be who you are.
Yeah.
Be where you're at in your journey.
Like, just if we can just be who we are a little bit more often, I think that it will go a longer way for everybody involved, right? So back to the community and talking about all of these things. What do you find is women's biggest fear with money? Because you speak to people all the time.
Yeah.
So you get to hear all of the things.
Yeah.
So what do you find is one of the biggest, I don't know, maybe fears about money or barriers that they're coming across?
So the biggest fear that women say, right? There's this what they say, and then there's also what I see.
Yeah.
So the biggest fear of what women say is not having enough, right? So the fear is not having enough to cover life's expenses or, God forbid, something happening.
Yeah.
Short term and long term.
Right.
So not having enough in the moment if something were to happen, but also not investing or having enough to cover how they want to live for years and years and years to come. So that's what women say, right? As far as their biggest fear. And I get that, like, especially as a mom.
Yeah.
I get that on a whole. It's one thing if it's me. I could live in a van. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I could do a bird bath in a public bathroom if I needed to.
We've been taught. But
when you have kids, you want to provide a certain quality of life for them. And so I think that it makes complete sense that the fear is there. However, the fear oftentimes paralyzes women from being able to do what they can to address the fear and be prepared, right? So they're so scared that they don't ever invest. They're so scared that they don't get on a plan or get support or whatever the case may be. The thing that I see, the biggest fear that I see looking in, right, watching and getting to chat with women week to week is judgment, is rejection, is fear of failure, but it's also fear of success and like how to maintain that. Yeah. So women are scared of how they might be judged for how they show up, what they do, the choices they make, so on and so forth, right? Family, friends, so on and so forth. They're concerned about, fear of failure because they failed before. Yep. And they know what that's like, and they don't want to do that again, right? This feeling of disappointment. Yeah. And then success is like, well, how do I keep up? Like, if things go right, how am I going to maintain it?
If this book is amazing, how am I going to do another book?
Right, yeah, because it feels like it's a lot. Yeah. But usually it's a lot up front, and then it gets easier and easier and easier the more times you do something. So that's like one of the illusions keeping women from growing. And so I would say, like, it's a great place to kind of wrap up our conversation, maybe with one more question. But the biggest fear typically is like, I'm not going to have enough. Okay, got it. Like, how do we help you make a plan for that? But what I see is, being scared of what people are going to think about you, being scared of like putting yourself out there, looking dumb or whatever, failing or succeeding. All of it's going to happen, and all of it probably has happened already. Right. Yeah. And it will continue to happen over and over again. And so maybe we just have to get used to that. And having a community helps with that cushion, because then it's like, oof. And then everyone can cheer you on. And then
Build you back up. Yeah. Throw you back out there. You got this. Right. So like, what is one thing that you want people to know most about you and your journey, and like how to get through what we're getting through?
Oh, what a good place to end. If anything, because I feel like people always say, oh, your story's so inspiring, so motivating. And I'm like, yay. It's just a reflection of the vision that you see for yourself, of the life that you want to live, and allow that reflection to be what gets you inspired to figure out your masterpiece. Yeah. Because not everyone wants to live life the way that I do, which is cool, right? But there's a vision that you have for your life, and allow my story or other people's stories to be the reflection that lets you know it's possible. Like whatever you want to do, it's possible. I just need to figure out my formula, you know, for success and getting there. And so I think that's the one thing I would want people to know is like, I'm not a unicorn because you're in our community and you've experienced progress in some way, shape, and form, right? Like you've seen the other ladies join and make progress. And that's why I love the lifetime access, because it's lifelong.
Like, you ain't never getting rid of me.
Right.
So it's all
we
good.
In this.
Right.
The goal is for us to do life together.
Yeah.
And that's why we're really stingy about who we enroll, because we got to want to do life together.
Right.
For a long time.
For a minute. Yeah, for sure. And everybody's amazing.
Oh
so
my
it's really
gosh.
good.
No, I'm so grateful that you came and that you are, you know, making this Q&A more fun than a talking head.
Girl, you know I got you.
Yes, you're such a good host. And that's why everyone should be checking out your podcast, because there's episodes that are, you know, on the internets, on the interwebs.
Out there.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So my show is called The Denise Show. And really it's just going through life, and I learn a lot of things, and I work in human resources. So I speak to many humans, right? It's like therapy, but in the workplace a little bit. So in the time that I've grown, I've just learned, and I felt the need to have to share it. Like, people, we're all going through it. It is not just you. It is not just me. Right. So that's really the podcast is whatever I'm going through at the moment. And I find that people are going through the same things. And so you can find me on Instagram at The Denise Show, right? You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I put myself on
everywhere.
Everything. Okay. So check me out, right? And hit me up if you want to have a conversation like this. Let's get on there, because we're going through things and it's okay. Yeah. That's the thing. It's just come authentically yourself and you will learn.
I love your show. I listen to it and I'm like, oh, this is good. And so that's one of the things that I'm grateful that you put yourself out there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And listen, my podcast has been on an unexpected hiatus for some time. Okay. Yeah. So that's why I say the episodes are in the interwebs. And once you create it, it can live
out there. Yeah.
Because you never know who your stuff is going to speak to. So I just want to give you your flowers and say thank you for showing up and for sharing what has been gifted to you to share. Yeah. Because I'm someone that's listening and pulling something from it. And maybe I don't tell you every time I listen. That's on me. But I highly recommend that everyone, you know, watching this, watch and listen to your podcast. Subscribe so that you don't miss when new episodes get uploaded. And I appreciate you. We might have to have you come back, maybe. Girl, if you're up for it.
Yeah. I love to talk. Like, we have to do this more often, for sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for being here.
Anytime.